You're good with your mic? All right, great. Excellent. So Heather's been talking to us about her calling and this unique moving from place to place and this season in her life. And really that's what it is. It's a season. And it could go on for 5 years. It might go on for 2 years. It could be 10. Only the Lord knows.
Yeah.
So now let's switch subjects and let's talk about being sent out by your church only, sent out by an agency only, or kind of sent out by both. And Pastor Trent from Calvary Chapel Saving Grace and Saving Grace World Missions spoke to us about this a little bit about 2 weeks ago, I think is when Pastor Trent was with us. And so we talked about the role of the church and what the church does, the role of the sending agency, and how they should be working together. Idealistically, they should be working together. The reason why I wanted to ask Heather this question is because Heather serves on a few different missions boards, as well as she's on the field. So she can give us the insight of what it's like to be receiving applications, receiving people and trying to figure out where do you fit, and then being in America and helping them go, as well as going herself. So as we talk about it, there's two different scenarios. There's the large organization and there's the small organization. So let me kind of give a background on this. The large organization is great because it has a ton of wisdom. But with that ton of wisdom, there's a lot of history. And history brings a ton of policies and politics. Okay, we call it the two P's. The two P's that kill any missions organization is too many policies and too much politics, because all these people and all these opinions and all that stuff. While on the other hand, there's the small organization that has almost no policies and almost no wisdom and no politics as well. So we have to find some balance between the two, because one's extremely flexible, the other one's extremely rigid. So Heather, what have you found in working with a missions organization? Have you interacted with larger organizations? And could you compare that a little bit with the organizations that you're a part of, which are a lot smaller, but yet not just getting started?
Sure.
Can you give us any wisdom on joining and being a part of a missions organization?
Sure. We are missionaries through Saving Grace World Missions, so that's our sending agency. But I feel like we would fall in the category of both. I feel like we are sent out from the local church as well. But as far as your question about Saving Grace World Missions and
Promise Child as well.
And Promise Child,
yes. These are both missions organizations.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, you know, in the context of Saving Grace World Missions and even Promise Child, both are, they know everyone's names. So, you know, they know every family within the organization. They know their kids. They know, you know, when you're coming and when you're, you know, where you are serving and, you know, how they can best help you and serve you. But there's a history there of years, you know. So Promise Child now has been a ministry for 10 years. At the time, you know, we learned about them, you know, there was, you know, still they were already in like 4 or 5 countries. It's not like, you know, they were just getting started. And same with Saving Grace. There was, you know, a good number of missionaries, but not hundreds and thousands. So we have met and have been a part of, you know, knowing what it's like to be a part of a large organization, because most of the missionaries that in my experience, that I've met on the field are with other large organizations. So, you know, some of those large organizations, I would say not only policies and, you know, procedures and whatnot, but a lot of rules come with that too. And also less flexibility to be led by the Lord in, you know, what it is you're called to do. So, you know, some of those, you know, maybe in Uganda we met missionaries who, you know, they couldn't have any visitors for 3 years. They only had to focus, they were only able to focus on language, or required to focus on language. They couldn't go home for a visit for the first 3 years.
3 years?
Yeah.
Wow.
But they also raised no support. Their paycheck was from that missions organization and those churches that supported that missions organization. So that they provided a crate with all their stuff, and they provided a house, and they provided a car, and they provided a paycheck. So they didn't technically have supporters. So, you know, but they also couldn't see their mom and dad for 3 or 4 years. You know, if the mom wanted to come and visit, she's having a baby, your mom couldn't come. You know, even if she wanted to. Serious, dead serious.
Wow, that's pretty extreme on the one side.
Yeah.
Wow.
And we've had others where other bigger organizations, because we've worked with Frontiers and Pioneers and, you know, and the IMB, like Independent Missions Board with the Southern Baptist. Yeah. So, you know, some of those other missionary organizations where, you know, they're part of the selection of what people group you're going to meet and what and minister to and what language you're going to learn. And let's just say along the process something changes, you know, like sometimes it happens. You feel you know, you sense the Lord's calling you in this direction, and you know, the Lord opens a door over here and you want to, you know, branch out. But those organizations really have more of a say-so in, you know, what people groups you're reaching, or they have a strategy of how they're going to reach these unreached groups. Or
let me give an example. I was with an International Missions Board, newer missionary, he's been there for a year, in Mozambique a couple months back, and I said, so how does it work with the, you know, the largest missions organization in the world, which is the Baptist, and we love them, so there's nothing negative, but I said, so how does it play itself out? You feel a call. And he said, well, so we meet with all these great guys with tons of wisdom, and we try to fit the language skills and the need and the history and all that to the right place. And then we go to this conference after like 2 years of the application process and training process. We go to this conference and we get like a day or two to choose where we think God's calling us to, the people group, the thing. And then once we're in and everybody accepts this, the missionaries, the senders, the receivers, then you're locked. You're locked in.
It's like signing the, like, you know.
Yeah, that's it. Boom.
The document.
And then, but he goes, but they give me a house and a car, and I don't raise any support, and all the Baptist churches, you know, worldwide give to this thing. And I thought, well, half of that's good, but the other half of it makes me feel like I got a ball and chain around me. That's crazy. But so, not to say that God can't work that way.
Sure, it's just different. It's not wrong, it's just different.
All we're talking about is personalities.
Yeah.
So you got to figure out what personality do you have. If you like structure, go with a big organization. What are you going to get? A lot of wisdom, but a lot of politics and a lot of rules.
And even when we were praying about how to send out missionaries from our church originally, I mean, I know you had heard Wes Bentley. I mean, FRM was, you know, Far-Reaching Ministries was one of those ministries that we knew of at the time, besides, you know, in addition to Saving Grace World Missions. So, you know, when we, you know, just like they were interviewing us, we were also asking them questions like, you know, are we able to, if God changes us from these 3 countries and maybe we decide, you know, we're not going to go to Africa, but we're going to go to Pakistan, is that possible? And what input would you have, and how would that work from our side? And, you know, so I feel like we have the best setup because it works for us. In that we get a lot of counsel and feedback, and it's a dialogue, but ultimately they're trusting that we're being led by the Lord, you know. But I have had even Pastor Trent, who shared with you last week, come to me and say, you know, there was a season where, you know, when I lost my parents and they went to be with the Lord, where he came and said to me, you know, as the, you know, the leader of this ministry, I don't believe that you're ready to go back to the field. I would seriously, you know, I really believe this is a word from the Lord for you, and I would really ask you to pray about staying for a longer period of time. And in the States, just to grieve and to be able to process all that had happened with losing both of my parents. And so, you know, they cared, they knew who I, you know, they knew me, they cared about my family, and he cared about me enough to not just go, yep, you got work to do, get back out there. Like maybe a bigger organization might have said, well, you've had your 6 weeks of time, now get going, you know, because that's all you're allowed. And so, you know, I really appreciate that part of the ministry, that, you know, that we can call for counsel at any time. I also know that, you know, and I've told other people in bigger organizations this, if something happened, we've had issues where, you know, like an earthquake or, you know, a security scare. And I know if I picked up the phone, you know, anyone on that board would come in a heartbeat if there was a problem, you know, and we, like a major problem, an emergency, a crisis. A true crisis, yeah. You know, so I feel really blessed, you know, to be a part of the missions agency.
If they're too small, they have no resources. If they're too big, they have too much politics. So you've got to figure out what part you fit in the best. And it's not that everybody fits in one organization or another. It's really a personality. So let me change the questions and talk about going out on our own. We might have great freedom, right? If we go out on our own. So why would I want to be sent out by a missions organization versus just getting a plane ticket, following this calling on my life, and just showing up in the country and saying, okay, Lord, here I am, total pilgrimage, right?
And
it's pretty much what Abraham did, just so you guys know. That's biblical. Abraham did it, Paul did it. How about us today? How do we?
We're really designed, I think, for fellowship and community. So to be like your own person out there by yourself, you're already in a foreign situation. Everything is foreign about it. The food, the living, the whatever, you know. So to not know someone else perhaps that is with that has your same situation or can speak into your life or who's gone before you and maybe they're serving in a different country, to not have any sort of fellowship or counsel from anyone else in the mission field or other missionaries. I know, you know, even if your organization's not huge, but then you get together with, you know, 20 or 30 other families and you're like, wow, you know, we're part of something bigger than just us. Because the enemy, I feel like likes, I mean, you already feel isolated. You're already different. You're already, you know, in this specific context. So then to be further removed where you don't have a team with you, you don't have anybody that you're working with, if that's possible.
You have no home church.
You have no home church.
No
Nobody cares about you.
No
Nobody's praying for you. No care team. No other missionaries to call on to say, like, has this happened to you? Like, I mean, I've called, you know, many people in our organization, other missionaries, they're not even serving in third world countries, like, hey, so when I even have contacted people like, okay, when you had a child, did you do this? Did you do that? How did you do the passport? How do you, I mean, just having people that you can call on, both missionaries and those with missions experience, to me is really, and it's just something you can't put a price tag on, you know?
The way that I describe it, if I'm acting as a missions pastor talking to a new missionary, is you're joining a family.
Yeah.
And as a family, we care. But at the same time, if you're an adult, you're an adult child in the family. So you're still a child to somebody, but they give you the ability to make adult decisions, but they still love you and honor you and want to provide for you as their own child. And so there's this wonderful family thing going on. So, with that said, some people have gone out and not had anybody with them. The only way that I have found to redeem the time, if you're already on the mission field and you're already in place, find any other missionary out there that speaks your common language and talk to them. Interviewing other missionaries is crucial to surviving. No matter if you're being sent out by a good organization or you went out solo, interviewing other missionaries will save your life. The reason why your midterm is interviewing other missionaries is so that you get a feel of how easy that is. They're going to be interviewing people from 2 different countries, asking them a series of questions. And so as you're doing that, you're going to realize there's so much wisdom out there, and we never tap into it. But there are people that have lived through it. So the people that trained me culturally were all people that were already living on the field. I went out with no training, no preparation, because we had no experience. And we said, God called us, buy a plane ticket, and just go. And we almost imploded as a team because we had no idea what we were doing. It was local Christians, national Christians, and foreign missionaries that we met on the field. And as we spent time with them, they literally chipped us down to nothing, and then the Lord rebuilt us into usable missionaries. So going out solo is dangerous, but if you're already out, talk to people that are out there. All right, let's ask another question, Heather. Choosing a church and or missions organization. Well, the Saving Grace World Missions, and we've heard from them and we know them because we're part of the board and the team and the church itself. But let's imagine our church doesn't have a sending organization in it versus a church that does. How do we choose that church, and how should we go about creating this relationship?
Choosing the church or choosing the organization?
Both, because we have a home church that we love. And let's say, and this is a real intense question.
Sure.
Let's say our pastor says, praise the Lord. right? Just go. And we're like, okay, now what do we do? Or our pastor says, okay, we don't really know how to do missions here, so go find an organization. Or our pastor says, whatever, I don't care. And you feel like you need to go find another church. There's all of these scenarios, and you and I have worked with people over the years. What are some of the scenarios that have been beneficial, that have helped? What are some of the questions that you might answer to us before we even ask them, in that sense?
Sure.
It's a loaded question.
Yeah, that's a lot. I think it's hard to be in a church where the pastor doesn't see the need for the gospel in the nations. That is a very challenging place to be. It's not as challenging if your pastor is supportive, but just doesn't know how to help you. You know, I think that's probably more of the questions that I get. You know, my pastor loves me and he's a great, pastor, but he doesn't know. It's like us. I mean, my husband was that pastor who was like, wait, what? Like, how do we do this? Like, we don't have a full-time accountant that can help collect, donations and send it overseas. And how does that even work? Like, how do we even do that? So, I mean, there's many different organizations. I would say interview them. Like, if you're not sure, ask all of those questions. Are they limited to specific countries? Are they open to any country? Are they, do they require you to do X, amount of training before you go? Like, what's required? And also, logistically, once you're on the field, what does that look like? And maybe some of those questions with a missions organization, maybe you have health issues, maybe insurance is like something that is really important to you. But if that missions agency or even that church doesn't offer that, then that might be an issue for you. You're a diabetic, whatever, right? So
there's 1,000 scenarios.
Yeah, there could be 1,000 scenarios to whatever that issue is. As far as a church, I would say, if you feel called, if you sense the Lord's calling you long term, it's best to be in a church that's supportive of missions in some way, shape, or form. They don't necessarily have to be the ones to facilitate that, because praise the Lord, there are missions agencies who, can come alongside. Although some churches are able to do that, I would say, at least the people that my experience is most churches aren't able to do that. It's most ideal to have a pastor that you know, or that knows you and knows your heart. I would say it's good to start sharing with your pastor now, because sometimes that, like for us, our assistant pastor was the one that really started fanning that flame in us, and like by him going, that was challenging to us. So, here we are, like, living in America with our nice, 3-car garage home and minding our own business, serving in the local church. Like, we didn't have an idea of like what the need was in Tanzania. It's not their fault necessarily, even, they might not know. So I think part of it is you're in this class, you can help to nicely and tactfully educate, like, this is what I'm learning, or, how can we implement a prayer meeting for missions in our church, and, what about this and that? So the Lord might do a work in that way, and if the person is just totally opposed to the whole concept, then you might want to find a church that, where they love missions and, and see the need for the gospel in other places.
You guys may remember, but I told the story about a senior pastor that said, when I get a mission newsletter, I just throw it away. I was like, what?
Yeah.
And I realized, he's a great guy, and on the radio at conferences, he's great, but I would simply couldn't attend his church as a missionary. Yeah. Why? And that's, of course, a very extreme, very small group that's like that. And then there's oftentimes the average church where the senior pastor just teaches. That's what he does. And then he says to another guy, you do the missions pastoring thing. Sure. And the missions pastor's all on fire. Well, that's great, as long as somebody there truly cares. And so when you're choosing a missions organization, the one thing you want to really look at, and we read about this, I think in chapter 3 of our book, is this, they're interviewing you, and you're interviewing them. Is it truly a marriage? Because that's what's happening, is you're creating a family. You're creating a marriage. Are they rigid? Are they inflexible? Are they, do they like to plan things out for 5 years before they do it? Or do they have spontaneity? Do they just say, wow, the Lord spoke this week? Great, let's get on the phone, let's Skype, let's take a trip, let's God's, on the move, And if we don't catch up or stay in step with the Spirit, we're going to lose track. And that's some churches are that way. Other churches are hyper-Pentecostal, and it's just something new every single week. And they don't really fulfill anything. It's just a bunch of what I would call hype. It's just tons of emotion. It's just every week there's something new, a new flash in the pan. There's got to be a perfect balance. We think long term. We have training. We're considering the full effect of sending a single girl to Nepal to work with girls that are being trafficked. You know, we're engaged with all of that. And so that's what we're looking for, is finding the right church to meet your situation. Now, let's talk about some different church personalities. And the question I have for Heather is, the missions organizations all have personalities, and the personality is normally set by the main leader or the one with the charisma. And so let's say, for example, Calvary Chapel churches. How are their teams? Are they intense? Are they crazy? Are they laid back? I mean, how do you find the average Calvary Chapel pastor as a missions pastor?
Mostly laid back. I would not describe them as intense.
Right.
Led by the Spirit. What's the Lord want? If God wants this, He'll provide. You know, there's not like, we're going to go do a fundraising campaign and have everyone, you know, there's not like this intensity of, you know, of we're going to get all this done. I mean, there's a few of those, but overall, that's kind of in general.
Laid back, flip-flops. It was crazy. I was with a bunch of Calvary guys over the years, and we kept ending up on beaches. And I thought, how did we get to Sri Lanka and end up on a beach, or Bali, Indonesia, and end up on a beach? And then I realized they're all surfers. How did we get to South Africa and end up on a beach? These guys were all surfers, and so they loved to surf, and surfing got them to some of these countries, and then God broke their heart as they were surfing with these kids, and then they became pastors and wanted to plant churches, and you'll find Calvary Chapels planted along the surfing route.
I want to hang out at the beach. No,
I mean, seriously. I mean, but that's the thing is they weren't, and this was early Calvary, right? We're all in transition. They weren't thinking about unreached people. 1.5 billion Muslims, you know, 1 billion Buddhists, almost 1 billion Hindus. They weren't thinking that. They were thinking, hey, I surfed there. It was really cool. God spoke to my heart. Let's plant a church. Really laid back. So when we're dealing with Calvaries, we're dealing with flip-flops. That's the way I describe Calvary Missions. Now, I love that part because it's like you said, led by the Spirit, taking the time. If God guides, God provides. Blessed are the flexible. All the things that Chuck taught to those Calvary pastors to talk to them about going into ministry. Now, let's talk about some other personalities. There's the really gung-ho people. The YWAMers is what I call them. Have you had any experience with YWAM?
Yes.
The largest short-term missions organization in the world. The Baptists are the largest long-term. YWAM's the largest short-term. How would you describe a YWAMer? Yeah, every country.
YWAMers are usually young people, like between the ages of 18 and 25. Very, very little to no training. They come with an agenda of all that they're going to do and be helpful.
Real short-term.
Very short-term minded. But also, and I feel like every YWAM base is different, but our experience has not always been positive in the sense of they're very led by the emotions, not by the word. Very experiential. And so, they want the adrenaline, they want the high. And so sometimes that doesn't always match up with the word in some of, you know, the types of things they engage in or teach or do. So it's a challenge, and they're huge.
And to be that big and to keep things pure would be really hard.
It's really hard.
What. That's a challenge.
Yeah. So.
But so what are the positives about YWAM?
Because
there's positive and negatives about everybody. Yeah.
There is. They give opportunity to young people to go overseas. Okay. That's a positive. I mean, if you go to a church that doesn't have short-term mission trips going on and you call YWAM, they got probably 10 trips from, you know, Orange County or LA going every year. So
at least, yeah.
At least,
yeah,
I'm just saying.
Hundreds, from Southern California.
So there's opportunity. They probably aren't going to deny you. I mean, I just feel like they take everybody. So, yeah, there's, I mean, those that's a positive. And they have places everywhere. So, I mean,
Right.
in
Every
most
country, yes.
countries have a YWAM base. So, you know, so it's, you know, I think just it's a different ministry philosophy, a different, you know, we're trying to equip nationals to plant churches, and they're doing a lot of other things, you know.
Right.
But it's exciting, and it might, you know, light some people up, but.
Now with the YWAMers, some of the guys that were my nationals that helped train me, I asked them, why are you even interacting with me? With all of my foolishness in my first couple of years of missions, they said, we went to YWAM and we met some really crazy people, and we learned to love everybody. They loved us, we loved them, and there was Europeans and Africans and Americans and Asians, and they all had to get along. So one of the great things about YWAM is it gets everybody in a place and teaches them to love each other, and it exposes them to missions. But know this, YWAM is not the long-term plan. It's a great thing, and I'm so thankful for them. But like you said, you get too big, and you start to lose track of purity. There's a lot of weird teachings, and a lot of weird emotions, you know, in that. But at the same time, we want people to get out and be a part of it. So we're thankful for YWAM. This last YWAM base that I stayed on in southern Africa, in the southern region, they focused not on Americans anymore or Europeans. They only focused on nationals that needed more training, because a national took over the base, and it was just a transition for the whole country with different things. And so he was bringing born-again pastors out of Muslim areas to the YWAM base to do intensive training, like you're talking about, 6 weeks at a time, and sending them out for 6 months and bringing them back for 6 weeks with their wives and their kids. So the whole family would come to the YWAM base. So they are even modifying, at least in some places. And they're all over the world. So it's like anything else. You get that big, the diversity is everywhere. All right, how about, so we talked about laid back, Calvary Chapel flip-flop. We've talked about YWAM gung-ho. How about guys like Far Reaching Ministries, Wes Bentley? How would you describe Wes, his personality?
Intense. Intense, passionate, very focused on the vision and the call. And so count the cost. If you're working in a war zone, you need to be ready. And so, you know, there's an intensity that comes with living daily in a place where there's death and war and suffering and very little comforts. Very, very little comforts. So I just, in Uganda, when it's the same family that serves with Far Reaching Ministries that we crossed paths with, but basically got to know in Uganda, and they serve in South Sudan. So just the level of sickness, the level of lack, you know, really, I mean, even for their kids, you know, they're living in South Sudan and they have like 5 or 6 kids, and they're not allowed outside the compound, you know, just feeling like they're in prison sometimes, you know, I mean, so finding the balance of, as a mom. For safety, for their own safety. So finding a way to be creative and let them still be kids, and, you know, so you really have to know that you're called, and called as a family, and so intense
I met
is the word.
This one family that works just near where we are. They're Americans, and they're out in the middle of nowhere. And I said, why are you guys in Kenya? You know, because as I was flying into South Sudan, they were flying out. And they said, well, it's this celebration, some government thing. And they said every soldier, which is every person in their area, is completely drunk for a whole week. And there's just machine guns everywhere. And so we get our boys out, because our boys will go over there and play with them. I mean, they're trained not to, but there's so many drunk soldiers, there's so many machine guns, we just can't let our boys go outside and play during that. So we come to Kenya and we spend time here and just kind of have like a little retreat center. So you're dealing with different personalities. So we can't say we should all be YWAM, or we should all be a Calvary church plant on a beach somewhere, or we should all be, guys know how many Calvaries there are in Hawaii? You ever counted them? I think there's more than 20 now. Okay, just know that. Hawaii is a small little place. But in talking about that, this is a full distraction. I'm totally taken off the path. In talking to the pastors in Hawaii, they all said this is the hardest place to do ministry.
Yes.
Because people come here either to escape reality, or they come here to retire. Like they want to just run from their problems in the mainland and just go find something to do in Hawaii, and they never find it. So in a sense, they're not worth anything in the body. They're just leeches, or they're retired and they don't want to do anything. They said it's way harder to pastor here than it is in California. But there's 20 or so Calvary Chapels in Hawaii. So coming back to Far Reaching Ministries, if you don't have the vision that Wes talked to us about last week. Now, I could see as he was talking, you guys were just like stunned. Who is this guy? And what is he talking about? Is that the way you guys felt?
A little bit.
Brother, you're ready to die right now. And he would just go on and on and on. You're like, man, he never stops. I call it laser focus. That's Wes, laser focus. And if he wasn't laser focused, he couldn't do what God's called him to do. So these personalities are crucial. So if we can't marry into that personality, don't join that missions organization. All right, so that's the intense one. And then we have, like for example, my ministry, Ends of the Earth. How would you describe Ends of the Earth? Just from a distance.
Awesome.
Yeah. What a great guest to come to our class.
I would say, how would I describe Ends of the Earth?
What would be the underlying focus of our ministry?
Unreached.
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 Do we work
people.
anywhere else?
No.
Do we work in big cities?
No.
No.
Do you want to come to Nepal and teach? No.
No. Yeah. I want to. But I can't.
Yes.
Because we got too much to do.
There's a lot.
Yeah, so if my ministry, for example, if you feel called to go to a place that has more than 2% Christians, I don't really connect with that because we're only called to the unreached, right? But I can't tell my brother, which is our senior pastor, you shouldn't live in America, especially in California, with literally a church on every corner. We did a study, and I talked to you guys about this in Missions 1. We did a study from my home church, Calvary Saving Grace, and I looked in the yellow pages, actually searched it online. Within a 5-mile radius, in a big circle, there were 20,000 Christian ministries within 5 miles of my church in any direction. That's, halfway homes and unwed moms and post-abortion care to every kind of church and every language you could ever want. Every 5 miles, 20,000 ministries. I mean, the number was so absurd I couldn't even fathom it. Where I'm in South Sudan, a country as big as Texas, and there's like 2 or 3 things going on.
Yeah.
Right. So we've got to be focused. But I'm not talking about death all the time. Right? Because I work with nationals and we work with tribes, not with the war zone. So just choosing missions organizations. Some are reserved, some are serious, some are daring, some are aggressive. How do we know what kind of missions organization that we want to be involved with? Like everybody here is praying about, Lord, send me the right direction. How can you advise somebody to ask the questions or perceive what their life would look like married to that ministry?
I would say, in a job, we have a boss, and that boss, like, how do we work and respond to a boss? If you have a boss that's very intense and telling you, what to do every day, and you need to be told, like, today you're going to do this, and then the next day, today you're going to do this, and today, and maybe that you need that. Maybe that's the kind of person that you're like, if I don't have somebody telling me every step of the way what to do, I'm lost. Like, I need that. And some missions organizations are like that. They're going to tell you what to do. Other mission, if you're like, I'm just a little bit more independent, I like to check in with my boss and I like that oversight, but I kind of go and, do my work and I can work independently. So I would say look at it as to what type of personality you respond and work well with. And maybe you work well with, a lot of those types of personalities, so if someone's passionate and intense and, very aggressive, but if you're like my experience as a child and I had somebody in our family and I just never got along with that guy, he was just too much for me. Well, then it's probably that agency is a little too much for you, So I just think,
Talk to us about Friends in Haiti.
Friends in Haiti.
In Haiti. Pastor Brian.
Oh.
And his personality.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Do some people work well with that?
Yes.
Others don't?
Some people, yeah. So we have a friend in Haiti, and I mean, he's passionate and has huge faith. I'm always challenged by his faith.
I call him John the Baptist.
But he's never going to dress up and wear a collared shirt. He's going to wear his T-shirt and walk into the Prime Minister's office and demand a meeting.
Yeah.
I'm mortified by that. Like, I want the collared shirt. Right. We're going to the Prime Minister's office in Haiti. Like, put on some pants, like some trousers. So, yeah. So I'm convicted by his faith, and I'm always stirred to memorize the Bible when I hang out with him more and more. Has he come to this class?
No, not yet.
Not yet.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
But
we all know him. Yeah.
But he also flies by the seat of his pants. You're lucky if there's a plan. You might get some information before you come. You might not. So just show up. And guess what? You're not going to use puppets ever on his ministry compound. Okay. He's not going to let you buy souvenirs.
And what's the deal with puppets?
He doesn't, he's not.
He just thinks they're
no,
bogus.
You don't need anything else but the gospel. So you don't need any VBS crafts. You don't need any of this other stuff that you packed on your team. No. Burn it. Go burn it.
He did.
Take your stuff outside. We just preach the gospel. We don't need crafts. We don't need puppets. We don't need face painting. No.
They bought souvenirs and he made them burn them.
He made them burn the souvenirs.
Because they were some kind of like a traditional voodoo thing,
I'm not
like a
joking.
mask or whatever. They're not just like jewelry. These were like traditional looking things. And he goes, no, this is of the devil. This is a voodoo thing. Burning them. Yeah.
I mean, we have people in Nepal that want to buy things that they don't know are idols. So we go, okay, hey, this symbol, it's associated with the Hindu religion. Like we give some foresight to that, but no, he just literally got onto like the box and told everyone, if you bring these in your suitcase, you might not be saved. You know, so. I mean, I'm just kidding. But I love him. I would hang out with him.
And his faith,
I probably wouldn't work with him all the time.
His faith stirs us.
Oh, so much.
His faith stirs us.
I'm challenged.
And so as I prayed about these different personalities, the Lord began showing me all through the Old and New Testament these same personalities.
Yeah.
Some were focused, like Paul, like intense. Other ones were like laid back, like no problem, like John, right? John the Apostle. And then some were like John the Baptist, which would be our friend Brian from Haiti. He's a modern day John the Baptist. I mean, the guy would do camel's hair and honey and locusts and the whole thing. He's had no problem with it, right? And Jesus said, hey, this guy is blessed. And so how can I say he's not like me? He's not walking with God. But I know that I can't walk with God with somebody hand in hand for years, right? Unless we really have the same personality. But as we read in our book, and this was 3 weeks ago, in our book in chapter 3, he talked about finding the mission organization that was like a marriage where they're different, you're different, and together you're complete, right? So you don't have to match exactly with the people that you're working with, but you need to be able to interact together to truly show the love of Christ. Question? Yes? No. Okay.
And I do think we haven't really talked about this side of the missions organization, but if it's a missions organization where you're raising support, like, or that's a responsibility that falls upon the missionary. If there are missions organizations that are intense, you know, that say you need to have this number of meetings, you need to share at this many places, you need to ask people at the end of that meeting to prayerfully consider giving funds to you on a monthly basis, and you're going to follow up with them in a week. Versus others who, you know, might not have that type of model or might not have that type of structure, you know. So, you know, you have to also figure that out too. You know, is that a model that support-wise you could function under, you know, versus, you know, maybe another model where, you know, they do want you to share, they do want you to make the need known, but there's not like and they do want you to, you know, let people know the needs and all of that, but there's not a very regimented fundraising strategy, I guess you would say. You know, it's much more dependent upon the Lord leading people's hearts, and, you know. And
how many missions organizations are you aware of, just off the top of your head? Like,
oh, that I know.
No, not name. Like, but I mean, how many have you run into overseas?
Probably at least 10, maybe 15.
Okay.
Yeah, that are recognizable.
Right. Yeah. I guess the question that
15. There's a lot.
Is when you're just looking around, you could find 100.
Yeah.
Within a couple days.
I'm sure if you Google.
And if you really searched, you'll find over 1,000. And these are all evangelical people that love God, that want to see people reach for the gospel. Some of them do it through agriculture. Others do it through animal husbandry. Others do it through kids. Some of them do it through unreached. Some
through wells, through water.
Soldiers in the middle of a war zone. Meaning
orphanages.
God has given us at this time in history so much, it's unbelievable. Yeah. And I think about Paul when he went out. And I think about Paul was a very focused individual. He was a lot like Brian or Wes or these guys we're talking about. At the same time, even though he was focused and he was totally independent, because the Lord said, Paul, I'm sending you to go to the kings, to the Gentiles, to the Jews, to turn them from darkness to light, from the power of Satan to God. Paul had the calling from Jesus. So it wasn't like he needed anybody. At the same time, he needed everybody around him, and he loved it when people were with him. Paul, in a sense, took like a year out of his life just to work with the church in Jerusalem to make sure that everybody was on the same page. So then he went back on the mission field. This is between his first journey and his second journey. He took time to go to Jerusalem to spend time with them so that everybody was in unity. So he didn't need them, but he wanted them. And they were all together. So let me conclude by reading a verse that's an underlined verse for our entire cultural training and ministry training. It's John chapter 13. You guys all know this is when Jesus was in the upper room. He had just washed the disciples' feet. He had shown them love beyond belief. He had just told Judas, go and do what you're going to do. That forgiveness, that servanthood, that love. And Jesus said in John 13:34, a new commandment I give to you, that you love one another, just as I have loved you. So how did Jesus love them? In every possible way, to the very end, as a total servant. And then in verse 35, he switches it, and he says, by this love, all people will know that you are my disciples. Or by this, if you have this love one for another. So Jesus has laid it out very clearly. Our love for each other and our team is our greatest witness. And so if we find a group of people that we can't connect with, there's going to be some major issues in that marriage. And that marriage is the evidence of God to the people. So when you're looking for a missions organization, praise the Lord that they have over 1,000 to choose from. And if you have trouble finding them, you know that after this class is over, meaning at the end of this semester, we do postgraduate counseling. Whenever you're feeling called to, call me, call Heather, call any of our guest speakers. I'll organize it. We can go do it together, meaning, Enrique wants to go. I'll go with Enrique to go meet with all these people to find out what's going to fit your ministry the best. If you need security training, if you need linguistics training, whatever you need, depending upon where you're going, we want to help you do that. So Heather, any closing thoughts that you want to give us about being a pilgrim and being a midterm missionary?
A midterm missionary.
Yeah.
It's not the norm, I would say, but it's what the Lord has called us to. And so, the Lord calls you to things you never imagined. And I think, for us, it wasn't something we planned. It wasn't something I knew from the time I was a little girl. But really, the Lord just wanted us to say yes, like to be available, to say yes to His call. And I would not trade what we get to do for anything. I don't miss, what my old life. I don't miss my house, even though I long for a place sometimes. And so we just always talk about we have the best job in the whole world. I get to serve the Lord every day, and just go on crazy, wild journeys of faith, and see God do amazing things and be a part of people's lives, and seeing people come to Christ and seeing churches planted. I just don't think that for us there's anything more rewarding or eternally, valued than
the fit.
Yeah. So be encouraged. Yeah. You don't have to have it all figured out, even after you finish this class.
Absolutely.
And there's lots of different roles that you can play as a part of the Great Commission and fulfilling that. So if I can be of any help, please, by all means, let us know. I do have some cards, and, would love, your prayers if you think of any of those countries or even think of us, so, yeah.
Let's pray for Heather. Lord, we pray for Heather and Lord, Bond, Lord, for their entire family, for moving around, for living in the States now in a new home in these past couple weeks. Lord, for going back out to Asia, to Africa. Lord, for this next season in their life. Lord, we pray that you will bless them, that you will speak clearly to them. Lord, that you will use their availability, Lord, for you. Lord, we know that it's never our abilities. It's just being open, Lord. And so we thank you that you've allowed Heather and Bond, Lord, and their churches, multiple that are sending them, the organizations they're a part of, Lord, to share in this blessing to serve you. Lord, bless our sister. Touch her as she goes. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.